What's up, guys? On this episode of the AI Operator Podcast, we are hanging out with Mohan Muthoo, the founder of Spring Drive, really a GTM shop helping startups scale outbound with smart systems and really a lot less manual work. Now, he's built a name for himself as one of the go-to experts in AI-driven GTM, working with tools like Smartlead, Instantly, and Clay to craft super efficient, highly personalized outbound machines. Now, he's helped early stage teams skip that just SDR grind by setting up scalable systems that just work. Now, we're going to dig into his up with modern outbound and what is actually working in the field right now. And ultimately, like why AI is just more than a buzzword, why it is really able to produce results, especially in the GTM market. So, Mohan, it is amazing to have you on the podcast. Thanks for making the time. How are we doing today?
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. And yeah, I'm doing great.
Awesome. Well, GTM is a huge world. Now, I was actually just, as we were kind of briefly speaking about before we started the podcast, it's a huge world. There's a lot happening. How did you originally get started in GTM and go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably what's a common journey for a lot of people in my space, which is I started when I was a BDR, doing cold calling, doing a little bit of cold email, cold outreach on LinkedIn, in-house at a company. I was at a marketing agency that was based in the US. I was doing all the remote stuff and primarily the time handling mid-market and enterprise across EMEA. And like this was around that 2020 point in time where a lot of the sort of tactics and strategies that I think traditionally were working just sort of started to become saturated in a way that people weren't starting to see results, right? This was basically the time period where early days of starting to see tools come out that were like, hey, we can do more of this personalization scale. We can do more useful, interesting things. And I remember like talking a lot to the team there, and they're a great company, by the way, and a great team. But I remember at the time saying, hey, look, maybe there's other ways that we can do this. But I think, and you know how it's like, in-house, in the sales team, people are, they want to do things in the way they know it's worked because you can kind of sell that more easily to senior leadership. And so there was a bit of resistance around that kind of stuff. So I went sort of on my own, if you like, exploration, just literally online, like trying to figure out what can we do here. And the first, I think there was a bunch of stuff, but I think the little bit of the, if you want to call it a watershed moment for me, was when I came across Clay. And Clay, for anyone who doesn't know, is a tool which basically, it's essentially a workflow orchestration tool. But at the time, one of the things that I was seeing with Clay was this idea around actually you can do all these kind of very, very personal, whether it's personalization, whether it's unique data insights, but at scale. Because the traditional trope at the time is basically like you either do very generic, basic things at volume, or you do a lot of personalization, but you hit 10 people a day because how can you. And so I sort of went into that. And that was a bit of a Pandora's box, right? Really going deep into then figuring out, okay, wow, there's actually all these other new things that are coming about. And that sort of led to me then starting the agency and it won.
Incredible. Yeah, Clay is a beast of a tool. For anyone listening that hasn't played around with Clay, make sure you spend time finding someone that does know what they're doing. I highly recommend that you find either a great YouTube channel or, an agency similar to Mohan's that can advise you on what to do there because you will spend. How much time did you spend? Like when you really went down the rabbit hole? I mean, like for some basic level stuff, because I feel like the Clay rabbit hole, I've gone down it a couple times myself and had to pull myself out because it's just like not what RevPilot's focus is right now. But what was your experience going down that rabbit hole the first time?
You know what? I'm a sales guy that like learns the tech, not the other way around. So for me, I was also very much like just looking at a spreadsheet gave me the chills, right? I was like, this is not what I'm natively built for. But and I think part of it was because in the early days of the agency, when I started to like get a few clients coming in, I was almost forced because of those campaigns to like figure it out. But I spent hours. I spent literally hours like on that. And I remember at the time, one of the guys who worked there, still works there, I believe, called Arturo, because they have an amazing team, like an amazing support team. And like, I don't know if they still do this, but like back in that time, I was like trying to figure things out and I would DM them and like he would get on a Loom with me. Like, and I'm just a random customer, right? And he'd get on a Loom with me and show me. So yeah, like credit to their team, really, really amazing. That helped a lot. But to answer your question, a lot of time, I think sometimes it's maybe, I don't want to say, maybe the complexity can be overstated, but I will agree that it can take a lot of time to get to grips with it. But I think it's worth it. I think it just has to be function, and this is, I suppose, what led to the rise of the GTM engineer, it has to be a function that is dedicated to it.
Yes.
It's not going to work for an SDR who's spending 75% of their day cold calling and then just like, I'll do a little bit of clay on the side. That's where it's going to get tricky.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why obviously we're an agency, but we highly recommend, we work with agencies for things that we don't specialize in, right? We hire out if we have a project and maybe that, there's a chunk of it that we just don't want to touch. We're huge fans in agencies and working with other agencies and partnering with agencies that complement our skill set and et cetera, et cetera. So anyone, that's starting out fresh, it's for me, it's just a matter of avoiding the mistakes that the agency or the person helping has already been through. Because when I look at clay, yes, you can figure it out on your own. Yes, it's not extremely complicated. But to your point, if your sole job is not researching clay, if me, for example, a founder and CEO, like I probably shouldn't be sitting in clay all day trying to figure out how to reach other, people in our industry that could be good leads for me. Just like most other people, just like sales reps should be on the phone, right? So that's amazing, man. Now, I want to talk about AI. It is called the AI Operator Podcast. And the whole reason that I created this podcast was obviously there's this huge transition of AI in sales operations. Now, the difference here is there are some people I talk to, and it's like there's really three buckets. We're way behind on AI. A lot of people fall in that category. The second category is, hey, we're playing with AI, but we don't know what to implement and what not to. And then we have like this future-paced, group of people, the early adopters, who are so far ahead that it's hard, like they're just using a new tool every week, and that's where I like to get leaders from different parts of the industry, like GTM and yourself, and really look at AI in that industry and say, what is working? What is not? So let's start with what isn't working. Maybe what are like mistakes that you see people make when it comes to AI inside of GTM?
I think it's a great question. I think, and a lot of these issues are inextricably linked. So there's a lot of, I think, what I would describe as AI overwhelm going on at the moment, which is also specifically tool overwhelm because there's so much AI washing going on. Where you'll have a tool that either basically doesn't use AI or uses it in extremely minimalist fashion, and the whole branding is like, we are using next gen AI, etc. And so on the one hand, there's a lot of companies that are trying to proxy the learning of AI with, there's this tool that's just come out that said it's going to do everything for us. I think the classic example is the AI SDR, right? That's sort of the very obvious example to use there. And I think what that overwhelm is creating is it's misdirecting sales teams and GTM teams generally in terms of how should I think about AI. So I think the first mistake is saying, well, let's jump into all these tools and assume that the tool is basically the function of the AI. I think what GTM teams need to start thinking about is firstly, think more simply about it, right? Don't think about all these different tools and so on. Ask yourself, map out your GTM and ask yourself, where are the bottlenecks? So I think it's very common right now for teams to launch into that and not do this process first. To look at, for example, well, if we have let's say a situation, let's give one example, right? So we have a situation where we get ghosted a lot from after our first call. And then you look at some of those calls and you're like, well, our team don't really seem to have a lot of prep or a lot of research or good research for those sales calls. What is the reason for it? Well, is it because they just don't have the data in addition to the fact they don't have the time to go and collect the data? Okay, that's a really good use case to say, well, we can bring AI in there to do lead research, do prospect research, and automate that into your, let's say, your AE's desk before those meetings take place. But I think without doing that sort of mapping initially and figuring out where should we use AI and why, then what happens is you go headfirst into the tools and it becomes a mess. And I think a lot of companies are doing that. I think they're seeing all these crazy tools and they're going straight there. And I think they need to take that step back. And then one last thing I'll say before I wrap my answer up on this is I think part of taking that step back is also focusing on the fundamentals. A lot of the things that we're doing with AI comes also down to how you learn to interact with the LLM models, right? So if you're doing lead research, let's say we're building an AI agent, a lot of these things are basically frames and contexts around training an LLM to think a certain way or to answer certain questions or to ask certain questions. That's the thing that teams need to really become native with and get good at. And that will clarify for them as well where they maybe don't need 20 tools, right? Mm-hmm. They maybe just need to apply an LLM like GPT or like Claude to certain situations, but then have really spend their time really refining great prompts or whatever it might be for those use cases.
Yeah, such a good answer. Thanks for breaking that down so clearly. I couldn't agree more. I quite literally was just having this conversation Friday of last week with one of our current clients, actually. And his current, like I said, you got these different buckets of people, and it's kind of easy to classify. And he's in the bucket right now where AI is always first. Like, let's solve it with AI. And I always have to pull him back a little bit and say, well, are we clear on the problem that we're actually trying to solve? Like you mentioned, because we don't want to solve problems that don't exist. And there's been quite a few where it was like, I need AI to do this. And it was like, well, we could potentially do that. Like, we could do anything. I'm a big believer and we can do just about anything. So we could do that. It's like, what kind of volume of leads? And it was basically, we need to respond to all of these leads that come in and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what kind of volume of leads are actually coming in? Well, maybe 5 a week. And it's like, whoa, like, if there's only 5 a week, like, why are we automating anything? Like, do we not have the time to reply? Like, we got to automate something else if you don't have time to reply to 5 qualified leads that are texting you back, So really, for me, it's exactly that, taking a step, asking why we're trying to solve the problem and what problem are we trying to solve in the first place? What is the easiest path to get there? Because it's not always AI. And then, could we use AI to solve this problem? So I think that path for a lot of founders right now, they're trying to use AI, but they're skipping the problem solving phase and just going straight to, we need to use AI for this.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you there, but just because what you just said, I think raised a good example of this as well. I think also the reason why I say as well to do that sort of mapping first is to figure out before, assuming AI doesn't exist, to first figure out what's actually the best process here. Because if you take that example, let's say a company, let's say they're doing very high ACV deals, they don't need or have a lot of, let's say, leads coming in. In that example, like, let's say it's 5 leads coming in a week or so on, you could use AI to automate the replies, right? And you could do that and it could look okay and look like a human reply. But what you could also do is say, well, maybe actually the best thing here would be because there's so few leads, I can get on the phone with them. But what I want is like the best data insights on these leads, which would take me a long time to do myself, which I can then use on the phone. So you first define that process and then you can say, right, like, okay, well, let's use the AI to automatically conduct that research on these companies, give that to me in real time, immediate notification in Slack, whatever it might be. But then I want to get on the phone with me, the person, right?
Yep.
And it could be the other way around, a different use case, right? But that's a really great example, I think, of where, there's no direction for the AI if you don't understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you lack the context on the problem. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's huge. I've been really looking, and it may or may not be the right way to look at it, but for us, we've been looking at AI as supercharging the sales process, kind of how we refer to it internally. So it's like, how can we're not here to replace SDRs. We're not here to replace BDRs at this point, like, is a world where we don't need sales reps at all and we don't have to pay commissions. Could be pretty cool, like, it wouldn't be cool for the sales reps, but it could be cool for me as a business owner, right? But I don't think we're anywhere near a point where we can eliminate their roles entirely. So what do we do with, go to market and AI? My opinion, it's empower and expand and make them so much better at what they do, where they spend more time having quality conversations with the people that they need to be having conversations with a ton of background, like you said, a ton of research that they wouldn't have been able to do before. Now, when it comes to go to market, we talked about Clay. What is your second favorite tool? And that Clay might not even be your favorite. What is your favorite tool currently that you're really bullish on that uses AI?
I think that's a really good question, because I don't want to just name an LLM, because I think that's kind of, well, you know what I mean? That's not really an answer. I was just saying AI is my favorite AI, right? But I like, I would say Clay's probably one of the pillar tools that we use. One of the things that we're really upskilling on at the moment is NA10. Obviously similar to Clay in many ways, but there's a vast amount of use cases outside that is becoming really interesting with that too. And I think in our space, there's a lot of specific use cases. Maybe because I also don't want to get mixed up thinking like, okay, AI versus automation. But to give an example, I suppose, where some of that becomes useful, like Appify, which is a great marketplace for scrapers, tying in those kinds of the APIs for tools like that into an AI, right? As you put it as well, like supercharges what you're doing with, let's say, go to market, right? If you're doing an outbound workflow, initially like scraping that data, and then it's like, well, what do we do with the data? Whereas now you can say, well, actually, we can schedule runs from Appify, let's say whatever the thing you're doing is, a signal data, whatever it might be, into an LLM, like GPT for research, and then funnel it into Claude for like writing personalized messages or whatever that might be. There's a few out there as well. I like Triggerfy. Triggerfy is great for social engagement. So it uses like AI to listen across LinkedIn for certain topics. I think another great way to find, I think, the needle in the haystack. I think that's what a lot of companies want to do right now. They want to find find them en masse, so to speak, right? And I think so Triggerfy is another cool tool too. But yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot out there. I think it also leads to the other side of this conversation, which is understanding the difference between like automation and AI. I think a lot of companies want, like, the idea of like, let's do an AI agent for everything has become quite kind of popular because it's like the shiny object. But actually, it's not just that it's overkill. Like, I think it actually causes more problems sometimes, right? If you've got a very simple process and what you're really trying to do is just have that done for you, you don't need AI, right? AI comes with different tropes because it's almost imitating human thought. It's trying to do that. And human thought, as we all know, it's far from perfect, right? It's not linear.
Yeah.
It makes mistakes. It does all these kinds of things.
Yep.
So I think that's an issue as well. Companies, in particularly in the context of GTM, looking at that, again, coming back to that idea of the map and looking at, well, where do we actually want to use tools to automate processes versus actually we need something to think for us here, right? And that's where you want to start thinking about.
So good. One thing you just mentioned that I want to like circle back to is AI versus automation, the difference between the two. And then you said something that, like, I hadn't heard it put that way, but it is so true, which is AI thinks or tries to think like a human, and humans don't always think that well, which is like the limitation, the other side of AI. It feels like this unlimited thing, but to your point, it is limited because it will do things that you might not want it to do. And it is so true. I think of, like, I was just talking earlier today, actually, about an AI agent that logs post-call activities for sales reps, right? And it's like, yeah, it's great, but like, it depends on how complex your post-call activity is. Like, maybe we just simplify the post-call activity, because if it's so complex that you need an AI agent to do it, it's a cool concept, but one, we might be able to just simplify and not need to do it at all. But two, does it have enough context to properly log these conversations? Or when responding to inbound text messages, is that other request that we talked about, does it have the context length and like all of the information it needs to have a really good educated guess? And then the last piece of that is telling it to do a very specific job. And I think that's where, for us, that is the biggest differentiation. Do we need it to think about what it's doing, or do we need it to just do a thing? Because that's where automation comes in, and you can just have it do a thing. And you don't need AI virtually at all in that. And maybe you do, but it's not a big, it's a small chunk, because there's no reason to use an AI agent, right? You can just use a step in the workflow. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit more. We love N8N. Some of my most successful YouTube videos are on N, and they just blew up. N8N is like my favorite platform right now. Every time I get in it, I feel really cool because it looks so good. You can do so much with it. But let's talk about that a little more. Like, where have you seen AI almost create a negative effect? In your processes?
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to talk about, because I see this a lot. Like, I'll see someone try and try and try again with like prompting to get something to work, where it's like, well, actually, this is conditional logic. Like, you've got a simple data set. I'll give you an example. So, we've had situations where, let's say we have like a job list, a list of job titles for an ICP. And a client will often be like, well, we're using AI to like sort through the list, etc. And it will be like, well, what do you want from the list? And it's like, well, we only want job titles if they have the word sales in it, because we're reaching out to salespeople, for example. And it's like, okay, are there any parameters around that? Like, is there any situation where it might not say sales, but you want it, or it does say sales and you don't want it? And it's like, no. If it says sales, we absolutely want it. If it doesn't say sales, we absolutely don't want it. That's an example of where the conditional logic is so simple, you're doing yourself an injustice by getting anything to think about that. Because that's a very simple, if it includes sales, yes.
So good.
If it doesn't, no. But then on the other flip side, you will have very, very large, complex data sets. Or for example, where let's use the example of where you have let's say you're building out a chatbot or like something that's going to talk to inbound leads, and you need it to understand swathes of data. We want it to understand your cookie policy, your privacy policy, your product line, your service, all that kind of stuff. Questions are never, an inbound lead isn't going to ask the question in like a if but logic, right? They're going to ask it in whatever way. So then you're like, okay, hold on a minute. It's almost impossible to do conditional logic here. We need to think. And I think that's, and yeah, so I think that's understanding that boundary, right? Where it's like, we don't need it to think. And I think getting it to think, it doesn't necessarily do it correct. And you can test it very easily because if you use an LLM, you ask it questions. If you ask it the same question later on, even slightly different, it will sometimes give you a different answer, like a human might, which a very simple API workflow wouldn't.
So good. That is the perfect use case of, the job title situation. If it has sales, super simple condition of, continue if it contains sales. That's all you have to do. And the amount of time that people are spending right now, and again, that's where, man, the simplicity of like knowing when to use AI. I said this since the beginning. I don't care how cool of stuff you could build. If you really aren't taking the context into these conversations, to me, you're just creating problems because you're selling AI as this solve all. I had a potential client, I'm hoping to work with him, paid a lot of money for an AI agent that does something so stupid simple that like, I kind of was like, they got one over on you, right? Like you paid a lot of money for something that was very, very simple. But it was because it was trying to implement AI without a reason behind it. It was just like, I told I need to use AI and I should. I could talk about when not to use AI all day, which is pretty funny. A question I have for you, this is a fun one. In your personal life, what is your favorite personal, just fun use case for AI, ChatGPT? Do you have anything?
Yeah. So you know what's funny? I think there's also there's a good element of learning to doing it for fun too, right? I think all companies should start with find where your problems really are. But if you want to get really good at AI, do the fun stuff too, because it opens your eyes up to other sides of it. I am at the moment quite a fan of Replicate and the Flux image generator. And initially I wanted to do it to spin up thumbnails for YouTube because I'm terrible at Canva design and all that kind of stuff, right? So I trained it on images of me and all the rest of it. And then the next thing I know, I'm just like, okay, do a picture of me in a suit looking cool. And you kind of get carried away with it, right? So I think a lot of that, I think Google VO3 is insane, absolutely insane. I gave it a simple prompt the other day, create a person giving a speech at the UN fighting for cold email to be free. And a very, very, that's the other thing, by the way, really simple prompts, which actually maybe is a different conversation, but really simple prompt. And it was just this perfectly realistic video. Wow. So I think having some fun with that stuff at the moment is good. Yeah. I think there's so many things, but it's funny though, when I say personal, that's kind of just me taking the piss with it. I'm not really using it for anything, right? But YouTube thumbnails a little bit, but.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, there's so many. I saw one the other day from my buddy. One of my buddies owns a marketing agency, and he was like, he has a readiness score. It actually pulls from his. I think he did a webhook into whatever his. I don't know if it's an Apple Watch or something, but it pulls basically his Strava Apple Watch data and analyzes it. And then ChatGPT goes in. He has an agent that reads all the data and does a full readiness breakdown. And it actually sends it to his Slack so his team can see it. And it's basically if it's below a 50, don't ping me today. I don't want to hear from you guys. If we're between a 50 and a 70, be careful what you ask. If we're 80 plus, then I'm good. You know what I mean? Let's rock and roll. So, and then it recommended a lot of cool stuff. Me personally, I think on the personal side, what have I been using AI for? I don't use Google anymore, which is a really
why, by the way.
Interesting topic, which is, I need to find someone really good with SEO and how they see that thing. That maybe that's our next episode that we'll do. But ranking in AI chat models is going to be huge. I think there's going to be a huge market for agencies that help you rank inside of there, depending on what that looks like. the SEO guys that'll let you do that. But yeah, I search everything. I was just in Paris and I wanted some really good French food. And it was like my girlfriend prompted ChatGPT for it. And I was like, no, no, no. I was like, you got to give it more context, And so I sent it like this 3-minute voice audio, and dude, I mean, it found this absolutely incredible French restaurant that was super low key. We went there, they had a reservation, luckily, amazing dinner. And then the waiter asked us, hey, how many times have you been to France? Like, and I was like, oh, this is my first time. And he's like, and you found this place? It was like, cause it was like that underground, like low key. And I was like, yeah.
That's crazy.
So
I think
go
no,
for
go
it.
ahead, go ahead.
It was just one of those where I was like, man, if you give it enough context, to the difference too between the list it gave my girlfriend and the list it gave me was so different. But I think there's just so many use cases now where I find such cool recommendations and different things, but a lot of ADHD knowledge that I probably don't need to be learning. I learned on there. So
I saw a crazy use case. Maybe this could work for like finding restaurants at some point too, but I think it was GPT 4.0 or maybe it was Gemini. I can't remember which one. But
yeah,
basically, like you can take a picture just like where you are outside, and it will pinpoint the location of where you are. And I don't want to give it an obvious one, but like a road sign. I was in, I think it was like Prague a few months ago, and I was in a mall. I was inside the mall, and I was coming up the elevator, and they're like, I took a picture because of the Tesco there, which for UK people will find funny. But anyway, took a picture. So it's just got like a little supermarket name, an elevator, and like a little bit of the outside. Like you can't tell. And I put it in, again, I can't remember if it was GPT or Gemini. I was like, where am I? And it went through the process. I was like, it's not going to get it. And it gave me the name of the mall on the exact street that I was in Prague. So it's possible that like in the future, you just take a picture and be like, oh, find me a great restaurant here I am. Right.
yeah,
So like, I think when I say future, I'm talking like 6 months, right? I don't think it's like,
for sure.
it
Yeah.
moves fast. Yeah, the use case is insane in terms of what's happening.
Yeah, that's I would love to pick your brain on just on a personal level another time on N8N and what workflows you're seeing there, because we've played. I did like a challenge for myself, which was like an AI agent every day for 30 days on YouTube. I lasted like 10 days just because I was one of those where I was like, I probably shouldn't be spending all my time building AI agents when I have a company to run. But I did have a ton of fun with it and built some really cool AI agents for the first few days. It was just like it was a really cool challenge because I got to, like agent 8. And then I was like, man, like now I have to be pretty creative with like what I'm going to build inside of here. One of my favorites was it's super simple too. Basically, I connected Telegram, to N8N as a chat node trigger and then straight to an AI agent, super simple AI agent prompt. And it was connected to a Google Sheet. So what it essentially does is allows me to text the Google Sheet at any time and ask it questions in words. So I can literally record the audio file and say, hey, how many sales did we have in the month of June? Right. And boop, it'll go in, it'll analyze the whole thing. Here's how many sales we had. Here's how much revenue we collected. Here's how much, and it was like amazing because I don't even have to look at a dashboard anymore. Right. Like,
Yeah.
and for some people who maybe a dashboard is like kind of overwhelming and they're like, for me, a dashboard is super easy to look at. Not everyone's that way. So that was one of my favorite use cases was you can connect it to basically any data set and then just text it, or voice message it and get incredible analysis back in seconds. So that was one of my favorite use cases. What's one of your favorite, like simple, it doesn't have to do with GTM specifically, but
Yeah. It's funny. I think NA10, I feel like right now I am with NA10 where I was with Play when I started out, right? So I'm learning the ropes with it.
I bet, yeah.
I've been working with an NA10 developer who's really great actually. And recently one of the things we built out, and Iqbali, this is a great example of like coming back to the AI fundamentals, right? So we built out basically a workflow that I basically will like. Have you heard of Whisper Flow?
I haven't, no.
The Whisper Flow is basically a tool where it's on your desktop. You hit like Control Alt Space, and it will record anything you're saying into a text box, right? So I use that all the time now because it's so much easier than typing. So I will just like speak ideas that I want for LinkedIn posts into a Google Doc, and I basically paste that into a little interface that we made, and it will automatically turn them into LinkedIn posts. Now, and this is kind of, we're talking a little bit about like context and all this kind of stuff, right? Getting into all that RAG and so on. But the key element here is, so it's a really simple workflow, works really, really well. And we have the AI agent in there that uses Claude to spin up the copy. What I liked about N8N is and this maybe is one of those like little bit differences with Clay, although Clay does allow you to do a lot of this stuff too, but the flexibility of like how we input that data, right? So I can like just speak to it to say, here's my idea, give me the thing,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But then what was interesting is when I first ran it, like the results weren't great because fundamentally it's the prompt that needed work.
Yeah.
And then also the context. So I know you mentioned this, like part of the other side of talking about fundamentally how do you get AI to create good output, the prompting, sure, and then it's also the context that we give it. And so we supplied it with like, here are the kinds of the kinds of LinkedIn posts that I think a post should be written like. I'll
Yeah.
structure. And then also, for example, his expertise, so you can think how my brain thinks, right? And we just threw like all these LinkedIn posts that I'd written before. And then refining the prompt and refining it to the point where now like it spits out virtually perfect LinkedIn post. Because I'm always trying to tell it like, don't sound like a perfectly
AI.
scripted thing. Because
Yeah.
humans wouldn't do that, right?
Yeah.
Humans aren't, so it comes back to that element of it. But yeah, I think with any tender specifically, that was a good one that we have. And I like as you say, like I like that you have all these different ways that you can trigger these workflows with, whether it's with Telegram, like through the chat node and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I think makes it pretty cool.
Amazing, man. Well, thank you so much. I know we're already over on time. It flows so well when you find someone else that's passionate about obviously these things, and truly appreciate you coming on the podcast, man, and sharing everything. Where can people find you if they want to check out your organization or you? I know you're on LinkedIn. You do a lot on LinkedIn from what I've seen. I'm more of like an Instagram guy myself. I actually hate LinkedIn. I probably need to be better at it. I probably need to take some examples from you. But yeah, where can people find you? I'll put the links in the chat below. But if you just want to shout them out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, first head on over to the website, which is just springdrive.co. So that's springdrive.co. And then also, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is spelled MohanMuthoo, Mohan Muthoo. I don't think there are that many people with my name, so you should hopefully find me if you search. But those are the two places to head.
Incredible, man. Well, for whoever is still listening, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. We appreciate the support. Make sure you subscribe and like, and keep an eye out for the next episode. Again, this is the AI Operator podcast hosted by RevPilot. And thanks to Mohan and Spring Drive for being incredible guests, having an incredible conversation. And yeah, I appreciate it, man. We'll see you on the other side. Okay.
Having me.